Hey everyone, Stuntman Mike here, just for some more comic book talk. Why not? So in the last year or so, I decided to do a mass read on a bunch of Daredevil. Not all of Daredevil, old hornhead, but quite a bit of it. And so I wanted to talk real quick, rank my favorite runs on Daredevil. So I have not read anything before Frank Miller or really after, except for Born Again. Most of my reading is going to have been Frank Miller or anything after the relaunch with Marvel Knights in 1998. And I guess I haven't read all of the current run as well, but whatever. We'll get into it. We'll start at the bottom here. And so my least favorite Daredevil run so far would be Andy Diggle with his Shadowland. I mean, I don't think his run started off necessarily bad. He had a very tough act to follow with Brubaker, leaving him with Daredevil being the leader of the Hand. So it had an interesting start of it, but I don't think it was a good idea for ninjas to have this massive fortress in the middle of New York City. And it was just a story that didn't need to be a massive street crime level crossover story. It could have just been a smaller Daredevil story with maybe a few of the heroes popping in, wondering what's going on with him. And then I just, for some reason, wasn't a fan of the Daredevil Reborn miniseries. That concludes it. Next up on my list is not exactly a run, but kind of would be the beginning of Daredevil Marvel Knights with art by Joe Quesada. I mean, Kevin Smith was pretty good, and then David Mack with his introducing Echo. I mean, they weren't necessarily bad stories, but they weren't my favorites. But it did have, at least the Kevin Smith one had a very pivotal moment in Daredevil's life that would it would keep going, would keep coming up at different points in later runs. Let's see, next up is the Charles Soule run. Once again, it wasn't a terrible run. Daredevil hasn't had too many terrible runs in decades, but Charles Soule for me, missed the mark just a little bit. I did appreciate Ron Garney's art. It was just very raw, and I really liked the newer black costume. But I mean, overall, it was still a fun run. It's just not as good as my later choices. Next up, and here's where I'm gonna I could kind of flip-flop these next two choices. I would say Mark Waid's run. Very fun run. It was an extremely fun run. I like the more happy Daredevil, but at the same time, later on, Mark Waid had, I think it was during the Purple Children arc, where we find out more that he is putting on this happy face, but he is super, super depressed, and it's just something I can relate to. And then we get to my next choice, which would be Ed Brubaker. Once again, another tough follow-up from Bendis, but I really like the first couple arcs with Daredevil in prison, and he had then, with the escape and trying to figure out who set various events into motion. So I thought that was a really good start for Brubaker's run. There's some stuff later on. I think like the last half of his run just really drug on for a long time, and I just wasn't quite as interested. I did also like the Mr. Fear arc to a certain degree. I mean, it made a terrifying, no pun intended, a terrifying villain. Now we're going into the top 3, which, I'm going to leave you on a cliffhanger here. So if you want to know what my top 3 Daredevil runs for what I've read are, go ahead and, like this, and subscribe and follow, whichever is on the platform you're doing. So yeah, Stuntman Mike, stay tuned for the top 3 Daredevil runs that I've read.